Hi, we are so excited to be here to get to provide this workshop. Now, before we get started, we want to acknowledge that in about 15 minutes, we are going to be time traveling back into the past because there was a lovely teachable moment when we did the workshop yesterday, which was that it wasn't clear who was supposed to be recording the lecture. And so about 15 minutes in, Miranda very cleverly noticed there was no little record button. And so she went and pushed it, which is why we're not re-recording the entire lecture. But we are going to re-record the beginning of our lecture. This is a teachable moment. Please make sure you are recording before you start.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to just, you'll hear us talking a lot about sound checking all your tech and checking all your tech and everything before every show as we go through it. And I think one of the things to do before every show is to just review that the jobs that everyone thinks everyone is doing are the jobs that everyone thinks everyone is doing.
So that being said, we are so happy to be with you today to talk to you a little bit about doing shows in a virtual environment or translating your existing practice for the virtual stage. We're so grateful and happy that we got to do this, and we were brave enough to talk ourselves into it because through this medium we've been able to raise millions of dollars for charities. We've gotten to perform for thousands of people around the world we otherwise never would have been able to interact with. It's helped us stay creative. We've learned so many new skills. We've been able to make enough money to survive and move to a little bit nicer apartment, as you'll see in our little montage video. And also, we have started to develop some relationships with organizations that we'll be able to work with well past the pandemic. So there are opportunities that we've built for our future. So this has been wonderful, and we want to give you the tools to be able to participate. So who are we?
Well, starting with me, I am Richard Lee, and I am an actor, dancer, choreographer, and educator based here, born and raised in Edmonton.
Yeah. And I'm Miranda Allen, and I am an actor. I come from a classical theater background, as well as an escape artist and a variety artist, and an internationally touring street performer.
And I'm primarily a stage magician working as a comedy character with a tiny little bit of theatrical background and a little bit of background in visual art and technology. I was in Vegas with Miranda when all this got started. I was very trepidatious about doing work online at the beginning. It seemed insurmountable and very weird and like a very strange new technology. So I'm glad that we eventually did end up doing this, but I just want to communicate that we didn't go into this thinking it's going to go so well. We did not know how it was going to go. Sometimes we don't even record the lecture. Things happen. But we're really, really grateful we did. So it all started off when Miranda and I were in Las Vegas for her spot on Penn & Teller's Fool Us.
Yeah, so I was shooting an episode of Penn & Teller Fool Us. And there was word that there was a virus going around in the world, but it was very new. And I shot my episode on March 10th. I flew home on March 11th. And the next day, we woke up and we were told that this was now considered a global pandemic, and if you'd just gotten home from another country, you were now in quarantine. At the time, my props were still with my performing partner, and it took us a long time to exchange all of our things back. So Carissa had come down to help me out with that, and then stayed in Vegas and started isolating with a friend who happened to be repairing a abandoned amusement park. So she was basically in isolation eating gummy worms and driving bumper cars, and then I ruined it.
Yep. Actually, technically the Canadian government ruined it.
Well, technically the pandemic ruined it.
All right. That's fair.
So basically there was that moment where Justin Trudeau was like, Canadians, it's time to come home. I was like, hey, I know you don't have a place in Canada anymore. You've been touring so much for the last 2 years. Richard and I talked. Do you want to come stay in our spare room? Also, the travel insurance companies have announced that your insurance is going to stop being valid in 2 weeks.
So I got on a plane very reluctantly.
Yeah, and so then, like so many of us in so many industries, not just the arts, we lost a lot of work. It was suddenly all canceled, and we went through this period of mourning and of uncertainty. I know I lost a lot of touring work, and Carissa lost like a whole bunch. We all lost a bunch of work. That's the main point. But yeah, so after this period of mourning, we noticed the National Arts Centers program that was giving out $1,000 micro grants to produce works for a live stream. And we decided to, hey, Carissa, why don't you bring that out? Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
And
I didn't think we'd get it. I really didn't think we'd get it because they don't usually fund magic, but they did.
yeah, but they did. And then we went on this 11th month journey, which we will now detail for you over a montage.
Everybody needs a montage. Okay, so when we did this live yesterday, we used the time while everyone was watching that beautiful montage to look at the survey everyone filled out about who they are. However, we've had more time to pore over it because that was yesterday. And from the survey everyone filled out, there was a lot of interest in learning about Zoom, in learning about different streaming programs that work on social media, like Vimeo Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, that kind of thing. A little bit of interest in StreamYard. Primarily, everyone was going to be doing live online plays, but there was some interest in cabaret and concert and pre-recorded live streams and also classes. It looks like most people want to be able to interact with their audience in some way. Not everybody. Computer proficiency, everybody kind of marked themselves about a 4 out of 5. Now, that's kind of a good opportunity for us to talk about some of our technical proficiency, I think. Richard?
Yeah, I would say I'm somewhere between a 1 and a 2. I can write emails and do very basic editing on iMovie.
Yeah, I'm not very computer proficient. I'm probably the same as Richard.
Right. I'm probably the most
Yes, you
computer proficient.
Yes.
My father was a computer technician, so I grew up with a computer in my bedroom. which does weird things to a brain. So I think I'm the most proficient in that area. The next area is lighting, sound, and video proficiency. Most people mark themselves around a 2-3. I think we've all learned mostly what we know about lighting and sound proficiency because this project. I'd had very little before this.
Yeah, I had to learn some of it as a street performer because suddenly I was performing without technicians all the time. So I had a little bit of that coming in.
Great. There's very high knowledge in our group for live performance. That is also reflected on in this couch. And also fairly around a 4 of people who've got experience self-producing, which will be really important when it comes into doing this because it is basically all self-producing.
Welcome to the Wild West.
Welcome to the Wild West. Okay, great. What everyone is most excited about for this workshop was pretty much everything. It's pretty much across the board, but it seems like the thing everyone was most interested was translating their performance practice to the virtual stage and connecting with people online, as well as lighting, camera, sounds, pretty much everything. But those were the areas where people were most interested in. And then in terms of things that people are comfortable with on Zoom, there seems to be all over the place. There are people, because most of this is at a 5, and there were 15 answers, which means about a third of people felt like they knew what was going on in a certain area, but 2/3 of people felt that almost all of the features that we listed they were not familiar with, outside of maybe they knew what screen sharing was, and they knew what the chat was. But other than that, we're all learning together, which is totally reasonable. Now, it might help to quickly talk about what our expertise are beyond just computer proficiencies, because I might be the most computer proficient in this group, but I'm certainly not the most knowledgeable in every area. Richard?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I come from a dance background, so I was used to arranging bodies, arranging my own body, arranging other bodies. I have a bit of writing background and worked a lot as an actor, so I was used to collaborating in sort of devised theater and devised dance sort of settings. Yeah.
Yeah, and I come from a theater background, so and I have sort of oscillated between doing like new work and self-produced stuff and more working for theater companies. So Richard and I kind of both brought in some of that theater language and some of that kind of collaborative self-producing know-how. I come from a background of street performance, so I'm very comfortable with interacting with audiences. And the other skills that I really brought into this was I'm good at building stuff out of nothing. I built this couch out of scrap wood and Amazon boxes.
Yeah, as you saw in the video.
Yeah.
It is made of hope.
So in terms of producing a show out of our house, I think that my weird buildy fixie skills are something that I've really brought in.
Great. So together we have put together a program for you that will help you basically take all of our skill sets between us and use them to translate your existing practice for the virtual stage. Yeah. So what can they expect?
Oh, I can tell you what to expect. I also wanted to say that part of the reason that we're telling you that is just so that you know that, like, we didn't all come in being wizards at this. No. We all came in. Richard wanted to puke every show that we did for the first 3 months.
It was a steady 3 months of just wanting to puke all over my keyboard.
Yeah, quite literally true.
Yeah, so it was a process for us, and so we're sharing that with you to know that, like, it's normal for it to be a process for you.
Yeah.
So here's some of the things you can expect in this workshop. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we've each translated our artistic practices online, so that you can get some ideas from that. We're going to talk about platforms and distribution, so the different ways in which you can get your work out to people. We're going to talk about some of the tasks involved in producing an online show and how that may affect whether you want to work on your own or as a team, and kind of how to do both of those things and distribute the tasks. We're going to talk specifically about performing for Zoom. Now, Zoom is our preferred platform. So when we say Zoom, a lot of the things we talk about are transferable. Not all of them. Zoom's got a lot of features, but essentially performing for the virtual stage. We're going to talk about some of those features and how they help you connect with your audience. And we're going to talk about ways in which you can use pre-records.
Yeah, great. So I believe this is where we handed it off to Richard.
Yeah, and I was going to talk about translating my artistic practice and about being a dancer and the tactile energy of the form when suddenly we warp to the past. And I'll wear a different sweater.
Everyone's going to be much better dressed.
So good.
Okay, bye. See ya. Oh, we are now being recorded.
We are now being recorded.
That was me. I didn't think I was going to announce it.
Oh, thanks, Miranda.
Thanks, Miranda.
It's now being recorded. Okay. And yeah, so obviously sharing weight, space, and sweat is not okay for the next little while. But working with a camera, I can now bring a different kind of intimacy to the kind of work I create. You know, a camera can move in closer and in more complex relationships with dancing bodies and with the locations than any standard proscenium live setup would ever allow. And editing also allows me to completely alter space and time, and the online work itself has also vastly expanded my reach as an artist. I have a private student in California. I'm taking classes from people in Europe that normally I would have had to spend thousands of dollars just to get there. So huge advantages in that way. As an actor, I mean, I had a bit of experience working on film prior to you, but a lot of the same stuff obviously still applies. It's still working in front of a camera. But specifically on working on this show, has required a lot of buildup of mental agility, of task switching between working as a tech, as a zoom switcher, as a stagehand, as a magician's assistant, to also a character in the show all at once within the same time. So there's certainly been a buildup of mental agility in this process. And the takeaway also from that, and I would expand this to many other people's processes and how they translate their artistic practice, is taking note of how the performers or the characters within the show embrace the technology of the medium. So the same way that we just naturally cheat out a little bit and cheat our faces up when we're playing the Varscona and we're playing to the top row to that unnaturally high level, but we just embrace it as part of that dramatic world. In that same way, we have to do that when we're performing on Zoom, where the camera and working the frame is all just a natural part of the dramatic world. Using polls, using breakout rooms. Not that you have to use all these features, but if you're using any of those features, the characters know what it is. It makes sense to them, so the audience doesn't have to pretend that the technology doesn't exist, that it hasn't been integrated, or that it's something to work around rather than work with. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then one of the things that I think we did really well that has made our show special and that has gotten us a lot of international recognition is that rather than, so we're doing a magic show, yes, but we also do live music in the show. We have theatrical moments. Richard does a dance number in pretty much every show. So the show is really a variety show, which means we've had the opportunity to learn how to communicate lots of different forms and also a full narrative. And so we've kind of come at this from a lot of different angles. And the success we've had really stems from the fact that we didn't take my existing show and just create roles for two other people. We started from scratch. So the three of us talked about what our individual skill sets were, what we wanted to bring to the medium, what we wanted to communicate with the show. Then we looked at what the Lucy Darling product, the character I perform as, what is special about that live show. And instead we focused on trying to translate the tones, the feelings, the things that were unique and special to that character, to this medium. And that took a lot of research and planning and hard thinking. But it's more difficult, but it's more effective because we'll use my perspective, which is as a magician. If I have a card trick that I do in person and I do it for you here, it might not translate because part of what might be great about that trick live is that you can touch the deck, or that I lean on you, or that I get in your face. Those things need to be translated emotionally. So for example, in real life, I would hand you a glass. Well, I can't hand you a glass. So instead, we make sure that we have audio signaling so that you know the glass is a real glass. So this table that is in front of us that we have our stuff on right now is in the show, and it has no tablecloth on it. So when we put it down, you can hear the sound of glass. So we make sure the folly creates a sense of a real space. But also in my live show, the thing that makes it special is improv and banter with the audience. So we had to find ways to use the medium to facilitate those things. Whatever your particular product is or your performative practices, those things you're trying to translate are going to be different. But rather than start from the routine or the show, starting with the intention, the tone, and what makes it special might give you a better place to start so that it translates a little bit more effectively.
Yeah. So Richard kind of talked about the relationship of the characters within the world to the technology, and Carissa's kind of talked on distilling what you do and then finding a way to deliver that through the technology. And I'm going to talk just briefly about, and all of this will get expanded on in different ways later, but I'm going to talk just briefly on the audience's relationship to the technology. Because audiences don't necessarily know the rules of engaging with a Zoom show, especially where we're at right now, because there were people that got on board with Zoom entertainment or virtual entertainment really early in the pandemic, and now they're like, I got this. And now, you know, we're coming up on a year, and we're getting to that point where now there's people that are like, ugh, fine, I'll go to a Zoom show. So, yeah. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we could really rely on there being like a certain level of knowledge or certain kind things to expect from our audiences. And now it's getting even more kind of blended and mixed because different people are kind of jumping into the mix now later in the game. And as I expressed through that groaning, some people already have a standing sour opinion of virtual entertainment, much like the sour opinions I've experienced in my years of street performing. A lot of people inherently don't trust street performers. And so, you know, having performed for 7 years at outdoor festivals and in public spaces around the world, I've gotten a great deal of experience in making people feel comfortable coming into a world or a performance space and interacting and teaching them how to interact with the performance that they're coming into. And there are some ways that we can do that that we'll get into more, kind of talking about how that relates to video games later. But essentially, it's a matter of using the features in the program to set up the world and the expectations of the world and how much interaction you're going to expect from the audience and what behavior you expect from them kind of early on. As I was writing this, I was thinking about how most performers, especially if you're a theater performer, you have different relationships to the fourth wall, right? Maybe it's always there, and maybe you're like, nah, I don't know. I do Carissa's show. There's never a fourth wall. I didn't have an example.
There is no.
But essentially, like, the Zoom screen is just a different kind of fourth wall, and the features and the way we use it gives us a variety of ways to break that and to bring the audience into our show. So, why doesn't Richard talk about some of the tasks involved in creating that show to bring the audience into?
Yeah. So,
Is that what we're doing? I think we're doing
No, we're talking about teams now, actually.
Did you start teams?
Yes.
Huh?
Don't you start teams?
Don't I start teams?
You start teams.
I'll just take the piece of paper back then.
It's not gonna be perfect, okay? We're all just doing our best.
That's the pandemic theme. We're all doing our best.
Just because it looks beautiful does not mean we're flawless. All right, teams.
Great. At least we're 2 minutes ahead of time.
We are 2 minutes ahead of schedule. There's wins and there's loses.
So, in terms of building this show for your online audience, there's a lot of different jobs, and some of them are very similar to your kind of standard theater or concert or general live performance jobs, right? There's stage managery types jobs, there's creation type jobs, there's outside eye and direction types jobs, there's tech jobs, there's box office-y type jobs. A lot of those are mostly fairly similar. However, excuse me, there are like a number of we live together. We're in the same bubble.
There was a bit and I had to do it. Sorry. Stop doing bits.
There are some other tasks that are specific to performing online, and we just want to give you a little bit of an idea of what those are, so that you can figure out how you might want to manage those if you are creating your show solo or if you are creating it with other people. So some of those tasks or jobs that are more specific to virtual shows are potentially video editing, externally checking sound and video quality. Because of the nature of software updates and things like that, it's something that is good to check every single time. Poor David had to watch us check about 5 or 6 different devices before we started this workshop. So having someone who can do that in a different location is very helpful. Managing audience participation and or volume during the show, if that's something that you want to have is audience interaction. You need to figure out whether you're doing that or someone else is kind of managing that. Admitting ticket holders, who's letting people into the meetings, spotlight switching, and a lot of these will get clarified what they are later, administering various other program features, and also making sure people know how to attend and enter your virtual event. Of the box office-y type jobs, it just gets a little bit more complicated when some people don't know how to get into the theater.
So you don't always have a team to work with. We are very lucky to be quarantined with some competent people, and we actually have part of our team is outside the home, which Richard will talk more about. But perhaps you're in a situation where you're performing alone. Well, then you're going to have to recognize that these tasks are all going to fall to you. So making sure to organize your time so that you can do all of those things is going to be really valuable. So for example, I don't like it, but I have done my show by myself, and every week I do a few coaching sessions. I coach several magicians and have also helped them put together their own solo shows. And what we try to do for them is create systems so that they can run these things on their own. And we'll talk about the technology of that later, but I'll give you a couple for examples. So today, because we were going to be doing this and we don't have our audience manager Chris with us, once the meeting was started, after we had invited you all in one at a time, I've actually turned off the waiting room. So if you get kicked off and you come back in, there'll be no waiting room. You'll just come right in. So because I don't have an audience manager, that's a good hack to get around that. Right in front of me on this little table, which I will pull out so you can see it, we have a stream deck, which is a switching device so that I can switch between camera angles and things. But we have a wireless keyboard and a wireless mouse so that from where I am, I can operate my own tech when I need to. And those things are really valuable if you have a solo practice, even if you're just coaching. Having a nice setup is valuable because it makes you look more professional and it helps with the Zoom fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Our team.
Yeah, so talking a little bit more about our team, Carissa had mentioned that we have an audience manager, and our audience manager, Chris, is actually 2 hours ahead of us in New York. So the fact that he is on a completely separate connection is great for when we do those sound and video checks. And also, he comes in handy for possible internet dropping out, pre-records. I'll talk about that a little bit later, so he's great for that. We have our director, Jim Millen, working out of Toronto. And then, of course, we have the three of us in our apartment with all of us performing in the show, with Miranda and I working as Carissa's magician's assistants, as well as characters in the form of butlers to Carissa's Lucy Darling, who is really anchoring the space and handling the bulk of the audience interactions and all of the magic. Of course, off screen, there's all the building of the magic that also happens largely in the hands of Carissa and with Miranda. And because they handle so much of the building, I will handle craft services from time to time. But I mean, like, it's goofy sounding when I say it because I just made sandwiches earlier and they were really simple. But that does factor into how you deal with your work now being in your home, with how the distribution of labor happens, not just in the official work time, but in all the sort of interstitial moments as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can I tack on two quick other things
Yeah.
to that? Richard and I also do all the spotlight switching throughout the show. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
about that as a feature more later, but mostly Richard does a lot of that. I do a lot of like kind of assistant stage manager type stuff of like running props and things like that. Carissa and I kind of split like rehearsal stage management type of duties.
One of us is better at it than the other.
But I don't like it.
I like it more, but you're better at it.
Yeah. Is there anything else we do during the show that's worth noting? Oh, admitting people.
Yes.
Because we do keep the weight room open. So Chris can do that, or Richard, or I do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think what Richard said about recognizing that if you're working from home, your domestic tasks are now part of your show in that they need to be appropriately managed. Otherwise, you won't eat. It's just very easy when you work from home to just forget to eat or sleep or take breaks or nap or be a person. Great. So let's talk about distribution platforms. So now you've got your show. How are you going to distribute it? Now, when we were looking at the survey we sent out, there was interest all along the board, but the interest sort of fell into a couple of categories that we'd like to talk about. So right now you're watching this on Zoom. The advantage of Zoom is immense. It's part of why we picked it. There are tons of features, and people are very familiar with it as a ticketed event platform. So at this point, about 40% of people who are going to go see theater have seen a show through a Zoom environment, according to some poll from allevents.com, which I don't know how much I believe, but whatever, there's a number there that exists. A lot of people have seen some kind of Zoom show, so they're familiar with this. They'll probably know how to log in, not necessarily, and there's many features to use. However, this was never designed to be a performative medium, so it's designed for meetings. Trying to And one of the things that we have done to try to make it feel more like a live show is we have Chris, our audience manager, basically live mixing the audience sound by inviting a number of people to turn on their microphones and cleaning up and controlling that sound as he goes. That's not really something that's very easy to do on Zoom because it's not built for it, but there's an amazing amount of stuff you can do. Now, StreamYard is specifically built to be a performative medium. Now, what StreamYard basically does is it combines, and we'll talk about these a little bit later. Right now on my computer, I am running Zoom, and Zoom is pulling information from a program known as Ecamm. Now, if you're on a Mac, Ecamm is probably what you'd use. If you're on a PC, it's probably OBS. There's a few other options, but these are basically programs that are going to allow you to build the show that you then send to your medium. Now, what StreamYard does is StreamYard combines those two things. So it's doing some of what Zoom is doing right now for us, and it's doing some of what Ecamm is doing for us. But people can't really watch it on StreamYard. It has to go somewhere. And also with StreamYard, there are some limitations in terms of how many people can be quote-unquote backstage with you. So there are some limitations, but because it was specifically created as a performative medium, and it's actually web-based rather than an application you have to on your computer, that's also got an advantage because it uses your internet rather than as much of your computer power. So if you have slightly poopier computer, that might be a good option for you. Now, there are definitely a lot of corporate shows that we have done in environments like Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Google Hangout, and BlueJean. We have done shows on there. It is a nightmare. I do not recommend it. It can be done.
There's no features.
There are no features. There are no features. It is very specifically a meeting platform. People are not familiar with it. It is harder to control people's microphones, but it can be done. And if you are going to do that, you are almost definitely going to want something like Ecamm or OBS, and to be tricking those programs into thinking that they're actually web cameras, so they import the data that you've already put in as pre-records and things like that. Now, one of the things that has become really popular, it was popular pre-pandemic, it's more popular now than it has ever been, which is Twitch. Twitch was specifically designed for live stream. Now, it favors specifically gamers and also lifestyle blogger type people, but it has expanded during the pandemic. So if you're doing an online concert, Twitch might be a good environment because it's designed to build community. So it's a live stream that simultaneously builds community. So if you're going to be doing weekly shows, Twitch might be your environment. And there is a way within the Twitch medium for people to donate and pay, so that can be really valuable. Now then, we had a lot of interest from all of you in things that are social media type live platforms. So YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Twitter Live, Instagram Live, all of the social media live, they all have a live because everybody does the same thing. These are very, very hard, if in some cases impossible, to do as a ticketed event. So you're going to be focusing on doing a free event or an event where you donate. So that's one restriction you're going to have. However, you can immediately push to your existing fan base on those platforms, and using a program like Restream, you can stream to them simultaneously, and they also pair up nicely with StreamYard. So you can run the show on StreamYard online, send that feed out to one of these platforms like YouTube Live or Facebook Live, and then be able to pull in your fan base. Now, this thing we're doing right now, we could also be pushing out to Facebook Live if we want to, and be showing Facebook Live what we're doing here. In Zoom. Just from Zoom, we could be sending out. So think about YouTube Live, all of these social media live platforms. Those are more of like a place for your final product to go, rather than a place, an environment to actually do the show. Because in those environments, the only interaction you're going to have is chat, and chat is kind of the most boring form of interaction. So just to think about it, there are lots and lots of options of how you're going to interact with people. So step one is going to be, what is your main goal? Is this main goal promotion, getting out to people, building community? Is it about doing ticketed events? What your goal is might be the first place you want to go to before deciding on which of these distribution platforms will be most appropriate for your product.
Yeah. We're going to talk about performing for Zoom in a sec, but I just wanted to note that we saw the questions popping up in the chat. We do have a questions section allotted for the last 25 minutes of this workshop, so we will be able to come to those towards the end.
So feel
get them.
Yes,
but
please
also
save them. Please ask them, put them in the chat so we can refer to them later.
Yeah,
sure.
Feel free to start adding now if you've got questions, and we see them, and we'll come to them later, because we only got so much time.
Yeah, so a quick chat about performing for Zoom, and I would extend this to all the other platforms as well. So connecting with the camera. Generally speaking, if you're working with any sort of direct address, you should be targeting your eyes to the camera lens. This may seem obvious. We probably all know that. But it's actually very easy to miss when we're performing on a laptop camera. Because the tendency is we see the monitor, we see people's faces, we see a person's face, and so we look towards their face, because that's our human instinct. But then we're not actually looking at the eye of the viewer, which is the camera. And so we don't quite get proper eye contact. We've overcome this right now because we have a whole teleprompter setup, which we'll talk about later. But if you're performing on your laptop, just remember, look at the camera lens rather than the person's face. Audio-wise,
Thank
I
you
think-
for nodding along now that you know we can see you on the teleprompter.
We can see all your faces.
We can see you.
Thank you for turning on your cameras.
Yes, and thank you for turning on your cameras.
Thank you very
It's
much.
great to see your faces.
It gives us energy.
Yes. Audio-wise, always a good idea to do a quick mic check with an outside source, someone else on a different internet source, whether another cohort member or whatever. Regardless of the quality of your mic and your levels, I would also say prioritize articulation over volume. And visually, it's also important to remember that the camera just picks up more. It just picks up all my talking with my hands and all my discrete shifts in postures and all that stuff. So just be aware of your own fidgeting and whether that's a choice or just a habit. Yeah, because we have the camera that just magnifies all these things for better and for worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Miranda.
Cool. All right. I'm going to come back to some questions about how you engage your audience. But I'm going to tack on just one more thing that I wanted to say about what Richard said about performing for the camera. If you don't have any experience with performing for the camera, it also depends on how close you are to your camera. If you're really close, tiny gestures on your face are going to look really big. If you're further back, then you have a bit more space to move around. So in terms of performing for Zoom, those are some of the kind of technical performer body and voice things. You also want to ask questions about how you're going to engage your audience, which I mentioned before. So some of the big things you want to ask are, do you want to be able to hear and or see them? If that's a thing, obviously you want to be on a platform like Zoom, and you need to find a way to ask them to turn on their cameras and or microphones and communicate that with them. Do you want them to be able to make choices that affect the show? We're going to talk about polls later, but Zoom has polling features in which, in our show, we have like a choose your own adventure section of the magic where the audience gets to make choices. You can also ask the audience to submit things in the chat. We'll talk about these features later, but there is options for having your audience have sway over the show that you give them. Do you want to be able to interact with you or with the other audience members? Like we said, improv is a huge part of who Lucy Darling is. And so for us, finding ways to be able to bring audience members up on screen with their permission and have Lucy interact with them, or have them interact with Lucy just through audio for certain routines so that she can actually improvise with audience members, has been really important. Do you want them to be able to interact with other audience members? Some shows like to have the audience in the chat being like, oh my god, this was so amazing, how do you think that was done? That was my favorite part. Hype. So that's an option as well.
That little hand emoji.
My goodness.
What kind? Look, I'm a street performer. Okay.
Okay.
What kind of interaction do you want to have with your audience? And then once you make these choices, of course, you need to decide how you're going to teach them what's expected of them. And of course, learning through play is much more interesting than boring instructions, right? So for this, let's have a think about video games. Carissa does a great comparison of this usually, but I'm going to take it today. So for example, if you play a Mario Brothers game for the first time, you don't know what any of the buttons do, especially if you're me. I wasn't allowed to play video games growing up. So the game gives you a bunch of low stakes obstacles for you to like try things and figure out how to jump, right? And then once you figure out the jump action, the game will give you a slightly bigger obstacle, and then slowly through gameplay, you learn all of the mechanics. And so in your show, you want to kind of make sure that the first thing you do is set up the world of the show, and then you give the audience little bite-sized bits to invite them to interact more and more so they know what the rules are. So for example, in our show, I do something really similar to what I did here, where before we started the workshop, I came in a little bubble and said, like, here's what we would like from you. Go fill in your Google form. In our other show, I sort of get the audience to play an improv game off the top. So that's a way to kind of set up and teach your audience what you want them to do. And so think about in your product how you want to teach your audience to interact with your show.
Great. So I'm going to quickly talk about directing focus. And one of the things you'll notice is we are doing it right now in this workshop. So when one of us is talking, the other two are staying still. There are 3 humans to look at, 3 faces to pull your attention. So when it's not our turn to pull the focus, the other ones are either looking at that person or looking at you to remind you to look at them. This is an opportunity to really direct where the focus is in the frame. Because everything is so close together visually, it's really, really easy to pull focus. And in the work that we do, which is a magic show, focus in a magic show is essential. So we have become quite obsessed with directing focus. And a lot of that just comes to, if I look up and to the left, you know I'm thinking, and you're going to look around the scene to figure out what I'm thinking about. If we have the audience interacting, as Miranda said, as only a voiceover, and they're not also on the screen with us, I have 2 options within the vocabulary, the visual movement vocabulary of our show. Either I'll lean in and look, and that signals the audience to listen for the audience member that I'm interacting with, or we have 2 monitors. Right now there is a monitor that is projecting up onto a teleprompter so that we can see you, but there's also a monitor here. So if I am talking to another audience member, when they're talking, I might look here while they're talking so that I have the opportunity to go, so that I can do a take to the audience. As the show builds, they recognize that when I'm looking here, I'm listening to the audience member. They realize what this means, and that I give myself a take to them. So those kind of ways of directing focus is really important. Now we want to really, really quickly talk to you about some program features that you can use within Zoom. But if you have any questions about program features that we're going to talk about, you can always Google it. Zoom has done a fantastic job of providing really good tutorials on their website for all of the features that they offer, and they will be the most up-to-date because every time Zoom does an update, we have to start over. Also, the same thing is true for YouTube Live, Instagram Live. Every main program wants you to use it. So they have all done a really good job of providing you with some great tutorials. But we just want to kind of go over some features really quickly to get you started thinking creatively. So for example,
spotlighting, which is one of the most common features that we see people be really trepidatious and sort of hesitant about, but it's actually one of the most useful and surprisingly one of the most easy features to learn about. So what you need to know first is that only hosts and co-hosts can spotlight switch, but if you've scheduled a meeting, you will automatically be made a host. So you can spotlight switch simply by clicking on a person's screen on their face, on their on their participant name on the participant list at the little ellipses, and a little column will show up, and it'll give you the option to spotlight this person. And you spotlight this person, and that just makes sure that they are locked, so that anyone who is on speaker view will see that screen, that person who has just been locked. Also, it should be obvious, but it isn't always, that only participants who have their cameras on can be spotlit. Under that same column where you found how to spotlight someone, you can also use the replace spotlight. So when you want to shift the spotlight over to the next person, so at the end of this workshop, we're going to go replace spotlight, and we'll bring it back to David at Edmonton Arts Council. So that's what we'll do. You can also add spotlights, again, from the same column that you would find by clicking on someone's picture. And then you can have multiple spotlights going at once. So we can have a split screen sort of setup, or 3 pictures at once. You can create your Brady Bunch without having to go to the whole gallery. And yeah.
So you're going to see all these things come into play a little bit later as we go through different setups. We're going to be using spotlighting and adding spotlighting to show you how all of these things interact.
Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll say quickly about spotlighting is it becomes an art in itself, in that you get to listen to the timing of a joke, or how to fill dead air, or how to really make a transition work based on the timing of your spotlighting. Whether this is improvised or whether it's pre-planned, you can work out where someone is already talking while they haven't been spotlit yet, called like an L cut in film editing, or you can do the reverse where someone is seen and then they start talking. You can make all sorts of different live editing choices through spotlighting.
Yeah.
Should we power through a couple of other
Yeah,
important
so
ones?
pinning is like spotlighting. It's something that Zoom has introduced fairly recently. And basically, pinning is spotlighting, but for the individual. So, in a second, a little bit later, we're going to show you how we do a split screen. We use the pinning feature, which means that I can basically spotlight someone, but only for my computer, and it won't affect what everyone else sees, whereas spotlighting affects what everyone sees.
Nice. The chat is pretty self-explanatory. You've already been using it, so I'll just say that the one feature that you might not know exists in the chat in Zoom is that you can actually share files. You also have the option to turn off the chat entirely if you don't want it to be distracting during your show.
You can also save the chat and reference it later in case there's something, people are talking in the chat and you want to see it after the show. You can download and save the chat later. There's also the opportunity to use polls, which we use to create a choose your own adventure vibe, but you could also use it for a murder mystery situation. I've seen it used for spooky shows, but a poll allows the audience to basically provide information for you, which could be how the show's going to go. One of the cool things about the poll as well is that you can show the results afterwards, so they can see what everybody did, or if you don't want to use that because it's distracting, you don't have to. Breakout rooms is something we used around our Christmas show to provide special rooms for family to hang out with each other before our show, which is really fun. But a breakout room is basically like this, but smaller. So there's the main room, and then there are little spaces where people can go, and either they can go to their own little breakout rooms, or you can guide them there and set it up so that they end up there where you want them to be.
So I'm going to talk very briefly about inputs and levels because that can get very complicated, but the very basics of it is step 1, get to know your in-meeting settings menu. So in Zoom, if you were on a Mac, it would be up in the top left corner, but just get to know that settings menu. Some of the things you can do in there is you can select which input, so which microphone, and which output, which speakers you'd like to use. So if you plug in an external microphone, you can just tell Zoom like that's where to get the data from. You can also set volume levels for inputs and outputs there. So you would just untick automatically adjust volume, and then you would use the toggle. And that can be really nice if you're if you have people performing from multiple locations and you want to match their volume levels, you can do a sound check and get that tweaked.
Yeah, you'll notice a little bit later when we switch between different rooms and setups that all of our volume levels are the same. That was all done through this method.
Yeah. And briefly, audience microphone controls. So obviously you can mute and unmute yourself with the little mute icon in the bottom corner of the screen. I'm not talking very loud. But there's also settings that can be applied to the entire meeting. This is done by the host. And those settings can control who can and can't unmute themselves and when. So, for example, you can have everyone automatically be muted when they arrive or automatically unmuted. Or you can set it up so they have the option. You can also you can give participants control to mute or unmute themselves during the meeting, or you can set it up so only the host and co-host can mute and unmute participants. So the way that we mix our sound with Chris is Chris looks for people who are leaning in and looks like they're having fun. He invites them to turn on their microphone, and then if their dog's barking and their kids are screaming and running around, he just mutes them again. And then he adds someone else. So he builds the volume of the audience throughout our show by gradually adding people. That's Richard.
Yeah. So a quick thing about screen sharing. So screen sharing is a great way to give tutorials, gather participant feedback, and to share images and video. It's a really basic, easy way of sharing images and video. You'll find it's the big green box that says screen share. It's at the bottom center row of your Zoom screen. You simply click on it. It'll give you some different options as to what you want to share, whether that's your desktop.
Don't
do it right now. Don't do it right now.
Also, I think you can only do it if you're a host or a co-host.
Yeah, usually only host and co-host can access it.
Yeah.
Depending on the settings that you put.
There is a feature that you can set up so that anyone can do it. But we don't have that activated right now. And right now you're set so that you cannot unmute yourself. But later on in the show, we will set it so you can unmute yourself. So we can actually change that in the meeting throughout. We can change what you're allowed to do.
Mm-hmm. A couple notes about sharing video through screen share. Make sure that you click on share sound and optimize video clip. Those will show up as little boxes that you can tick after you've clicked on the share screen button, because there are a window will open up, and at the bottom left of that window you'll see those options, and you want to click those so that when you share the screen of your video there is sound and it's optimized for the video clip. One last thing about screen sharing: when you click share desktop, and I found this out in the embarrassing way, what you see when you think you're sharing your desktop isn't necessarily what everyone else is seeing. So, and this may have changed due to updates with Zoom.
No, it has not.
It has not. Okay, good. Good to know. So,
Happened to me too.
the best practice then, whenever you do a screen share, and especially of your desktop, is close any applications or documents that you don't need open at the time. Thankfully, mine was just like a set list of stickies of what the show was, but it's still, it's still a peek into the behind the curtain. So you don't want to do that. Close everything else.
We might have had a list on there as well that was like, don't turn these people's microphones on. They're loud and obnoxious.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we may have had some really incriminating, insulting stickies on there. Finally, hosts and co-hosts. So yeah, as I mentioned, whoever initially started the meeting is automatically designated as a host, but this can be transferred. Hosts have the ability to operate spotlights, mute, unmute participants, remove participants, and grant co-hosting duties to other participants. Co-hosts have basically all these abilities except for granting co-hosting abilities to other participants. If you have any concern about your internet connection dropping out and you're the host, it's a good idea to have a co-host on a separate interconnection, as they will automatically become the host when your connection drops out.
Hopefully it won't.
Hopefully it won't.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later.
Renaming participants. This is just a useful tool if you want to be able to find people in the participant list. Anyone can rename themselves. Hosts and co-hosts can rename other people in the meeting. Sometimes we put an asterisk in front of our participant's name if we know that they've volunteered to play along. That way it's easy for Chris to find them in the participant list and come back to them if there's a routine for them to interact with Lucy.
Yeah, because it will reshuffle that participant list and it will put anyone with an asterisk in front of their name at the top.
Below the host and the co-host.
Right below the host and the co-host.
Yeah.
So that's easier to find. Okay, so we're going, it's taking us a little longer to get through this than we expected, so I'm just going to say some stuff really quick. You can use overlays over your image to add a watermark, but also to do some fun stuff. For example, this is going to do a weird thing, but I can show you a thing. So this is so many us's, but that's done with an overlay, that frame that is around it. It can add a watermark. We used it in our show with a binocular frame to make it look like we were spying on participants. We made one that had like foggy edges as a way of communicating a dream sequence. These overlays don't just have to be watermarks or have to be like structural. They can be ways of communicating environments. We could have like planty plants all around us, and then now we're in a forest. You can use them creatively. Original sound setting. So many of you said that you were interested in doing a concert. Please look up original sound. So Zoom has a lot of sound suppression. Yeah, somebody's like, yes. Zoom has a lot of sound suppression things, and what it's primarily doing is it's listening for things that might be background noise. And Zoom has decided all music is background noise. So even if you're playing it directly into the microphone, it's background noise. If you turn on original sound, what that actually does is turn off all of that information sound sorting that Zoom is doing, and you will get whatever sound is coming straight in through your microphone. So we pretty much have original sound on all the time, because otherwise this background music you're hearing now would be slowly being picked out of my sound. Is it even on?
Maybe there was... Oh, someone's giving us a thumbs up.
Oh, it's on.
Okay.
Okay, we just have it run really quietly. So basically you wouldn't be able to hear that sound because Zoom would be working so hard to suppress that sound that you wouldn't hear it at all. It's
It's
Oh,
still
okay,
still
it's on.
playing. Yeah,
All right,
we're-
I'm turn it off now. Here, turn it off now. Sometimes it's good that Zoom takes out the music. So please look for the original sound setting. It's something that's going to be in your advanced settings, in your sound tab on Zoom. It's really valuable. A lot of other programs have similar things. So if you're going to do a concert, look up specifically what that Zooming platform does and has for features specifically for musicians. Waiting rooms we already talked about, you can turn them off. We were going to do a whole fun silly thing with virtual backgrounds, but we just do not have the time. So if during your questions you're like, show us some cool stuff with virtual backgrounds, we will, but we're not going to do that right now because there's a lot of information. Hey, Richard.
A lot of information.
Pre-records.
Yeah, let's talk pre-records. So pre-records, any pre-recorded material. Pre-records are a great way to take a break. Take a break mid-show, get other routines set up for when you return to live material. They also function as a break for the audience, so they can sit back and watch that section in the same way that they would watch a TV show or a movie, versus having to lean in and play in the more interactive sections. So when you're structuring your show, it's a great idea to look at the balance between pre-recorded and interactive so that you really get a chance to like ride the wave of audience interaction and not completely wear them out, but also not have them completely sitting back. Pre-records are great for tricky material and transitions, so you can smoothly incorporate, anything that's like from a different location or was extremely messy.
Do you want to see one?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Oh no, this is a transition one.
Oh,
Don't
the
worry.
transition one. Never mind.
Okay, yeah.
No,
Yes.
you can do it. I
Oh
was
yeah.
just telling
yeah.
Richard it wasn't the
Yeah.
thing you thought.
Yeah. So things like that to give us time to do polls, or we could have like a title screen on it that's like, here's the next routine. And really that's just to give us 2 seconds to pull a table in so it's not messy. They are so valuable.
Yeah, so valuable. Pre-records are great for doing complex group numbers, anything with multiple dancers or multiple musicians in multiple locations, simply because, as far as I know with the technology, there's too much of a delay to do things on strict counts. So pre-records are going to be your best bet in that situation. And finally, pre-records are great for backup material. If you have technical difficulties...
That's supposed to be a cat. It makes sense if you've seen our show.
And the cat knocks down all the lights.
He knocks all the lights down.
Yeah.
We're not going to show you because we're running out of time. But it's very cute.
Yeah. So basically, you have some material to fill, and also to fill while you fix things. It's good to make sure that another person on another source, so another co-host, has that pre-recorded material. Because if your internet drops out, you're not going to be able to play the backup material. So that's why we give our pre-recorded material to Chris in New York, our audience manager, so that if we suddenly drop out, he's made host, he puts on the pre-recorded material, we contact him on the phone and go, here's what's up, can you play another clip? Or like, yeah, we're good to go in like a minute. So
Great.
That's what they're good for.
So Richard and Miranda are going to go set up a different environment. This thing that you're seeing right now, this is our like very advanced setup, which as you can see from the video we went through at the beginning has taken us a long time to get to. But Miranda and Richard are running off to set up a more basic environment. And while they're doing that, I'm going to quickly talk to you about the ways that you can combine live elements and pre-records in order to create a seamless cabaret style show or a fundraiser. As we said at the beginning, we have raised literally millions of dollars, not by ourselves, but with other performers. We've helped raise millions of dollars for charity organizations over the last 9 months. And typically our role in those environments is to be an anchored presence. So Lucy is a good host. So Lucy will host the show. We will do our stuff live. I'm also just currently looking for Richard in the list of participants so that I can spotlight him. Sorry? Good to go. Okay, great. So I'll quickly wrap this up. So basically what we do is we are the live presence, we're the live host, and we are throwing to pre-recorded videos of other performers. And this is a great way to do any kind of cabaret or any kind of specialty event. We've also done environments where our team is the live thing, we're throwing to videos, and a variety of live things as well. But it means that we can change things on the fly. We did a show where we helped David Copperfield get inaugurated. And what we did in that environment is we were actually co-hosting with another live performer, and his internet died. So having 2 live co-hosts can sometimes be valuable. So I'm going to throw over to Richard to show you a fairly introductory level setup so that you don't feel overwhelmed by our setup. Richard, y'all ready?
I'm all ready. So here I am in a setup we're all quite familiar with, what most of us look like in the gallery view. Let's take note of a few things. So the camera's just on my desk right now. It's facing up, kind of into my nose. I'm out of the center of the frame. I'm basically like my parents on a Zoom call. Like this is how we're used to talking on Zoom. But of course, if I want to do a show, I'm gonna fix up some things. So first of all, I'm gonna clean up my background. We'll close this closet. Take this bag off the wall. Just have a little less distractions in the background. I'm gonna fix this looking up my nose camera angle. Just put a box on the desk.
Should we add the roving camera?
Yeah, let's add the roving camera so we can get a view from the outside there.
Great. I'm just looking for it. I will add it here in a quick.
I've just added it.
Oh,
There we
great.
go.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
So you see, yeah, my desk or my laptop is just on the desk. Instead, I'm gonna add this handy dandy cardboard box. And then set up the laptop so that eye level, again, the reminder to look actually into the camera as opposed to my own face or the other person's face. And so now we have a much more comfortable and pleasant camera frame. Next, let's talk about lighting. Right now, I have a window just behind me, so I have a lot of natural light coming in. It's not bad. It looks okay. Depending whether that might be nuts. Some basic lighting. I have a lamp just 45 degrees to the right of my face and another lamp to 45 degrees to the left of my face. Turn both of those on. And I'll close the curtain. And it's okay now. We also have another curtain over there, so there's a bit of light spill. Let's just close that curtain.
Can't close it because we just moved and I haven't put a curtain on that one yet. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Moving in troubles. So anyways, so I got two light sources on my face right now. It's the light quality on my right is a little bit harsh, so I'm going to soften it. I'm going to take a sheet of paper that's kind of translucent and just put it over top of the lamp so that we have some softening for it. There we go. Of course, if you have an incandescent bulb, don't leave that paper alone because it will light on fire. But yeah, simple translucent will just soften that light a little bit.
Can we just address this hotspot?
Yeah, let's address the hotspot.
Because I can't close the curtain right now, Richard's getting this hotspot on his yeah, you can point it there.
My collar there.
So what we would normally do is we would find where that was coming from and we would block it. So I'm trying to find it right now using this manila envelope and I'm not succeeding. But part of the reason the camera quality isn't as good is because the camera is compensating for that hotspot. And there we go. And not for what Richard actually looks like. So so that's how you would try to fix that and hopefully you do better than I just did.
Yeah, handy dandy investment, curtains.
That's what we call it,
so
teachable
past lighting,
moment.
Yeah. And again, if you're working on a setup like mine, your camera is built into your computer, and so is your microphone. I don't know if you've ever been on Zoom meetings, but you get this going on. Can you all hear that? That awful, terrible noise of the microphone being rubbed? Yeah, so that's because my microphone is actually built into just the top right corner of my keyboard. Yours might be in a different place. It's good to just like feel it out and test where it is. And then to get out of the habit of when you are on Zoom, performing on Zoom, of whenever you are on the chat or just like absentmindedly running your hand over your keyboard to not rub the mic because it makes quite a bit of noise. So that's pretty much all you need to know for this setup. The last thing I will mention, however, is taking a soft cloth and occasionally wiping down your camera because it does get greasy, especially if you have a habit of opening your laptop with your thumb right here over the camera. Yeah. All right. We are going to go over to the next setup now, which is a little more advanced. Miranda is in setup 2 here.
Hello. All right, let's find out how that change in natural lighting has affected the setup we made for you in here. That's one of the things about natural lighting is it just throws you curveballs all the time. So in this setup, it is, oh, I'm already on this camera, great. So in this setup, it's a little bit more advanced. Right now I'm looking at you with an external camera. I'm just gonna switch quickly back to, this is my computer camera. So you can see how it's a little bit more gray. It looks a little bit different, right? I've also got an external mic here and I'm using a ring light. We're gonna go to the roving camera. We're gonna add that in so that you can see what we're looking at. So we've got the ring light. I've got this mic on this stand here. Good. How's my volume? Can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. Great. Okay. So like I said, this is the computer camera. And really, like Richard said, make sure you're wiping those with a cloth because where we open our laptops is right on the camera. So we're constantly putting our thumbs on them. But we've also got set up here an iPhone as an external camera, which I will just switch to using eCam. So you can see when I switched to this camera, the tone changed a lot, right? There's a lot more warmth and the image quality is actually a little bit better. Most iPhones actually have an awesome camera, but it's the rear facing camera. So you can see on the roving camera, you can see my image here. I'm not using the camera on the screen side. I'm using the camera on the other side. And because we keep our phones in our pockets, we want to make sure that we give that a proper wipe with a cloth as well before we do our show. Otherwise, you're going to have that BBC season 1 of Doctor Who Vaseline on the lens look. Check your tech before every show. Every time you introduce a new element like an external mic or an external camera, you're introducing a failure point. And so you need to check on that every show. Also, every time there's a program update, it's going to change, it could change the way that the software interacts with those things. And that can throw you some nasty surprises. While we've got the roving camera here, no, I'm going to say one more thing about adding external cameras and microphones, which is that when you add an external camera and an external microphone, there's also the possibility that your audio and your video won't be synchronized. But there are programs that can help you fix that. Carissa will talk about some of those programs when we get back to the big room. Now, that said, while we've got the roving camera here, you can see that what we're doing right now is we're actually shooting into the corner. And that gives quite a bit of depth because this desk is actually quite close to this wall. But to make the image more interesting, we're shooting on an angle into the corner. It just makes it more visual, more, I don't know, dynamic. But the other reason that we're doing this is because this is literally Carissa's bedroom. You could produce a show from your bedroom. She coaches in here all the time. And so Carissa has very cleverly positioned her desk at the end of her bed in the center of the room. And so if you're like, I don't have a clean background, or there's always something weird in the background, have a think about where you can put your camera in your room, potentially in the middle of your room, so that maybe you just skip over some of the mess or the stuff that you don't want to show people. Great. Just going to check if there's anything else that I missed about that. Awesome. In terms of positioning your camera and the look of your room, of course, you also want to ask, what does this communicate about the person, right? So here, we've got a little bit of Van Gogh's Starry Night, which tells you something about the person who actually lives in this room. You're an artist. The colors are selected very well. We've got a plant. So just have a think about, of course, how you're building the world of your show for your audience, the things that are in your foreground, the things that are in your background. That all communicates information to your audience. I'm going to talk about mics again, but I think you can go back to the big room. Thank you. Just to talk about mics, for those of you that don't have much experience with mics, one, find out what the range of your microphone is. This is Carissa's podcasting microphone. The reason she has this setup in here is because she actually does like quite a bit of coaching and things like that in here. So this is a great microphone for being this close. Also find out if your microphone has a pop filter. So there's certain consonants like P's and B's that really hit the microphone. So if your microphone doesn't have a pop filter, then rather than talking into it, you can talk past it, which will help control the intensity of those pops. Really simple thing that changes a lot. Generally, the audience will forgive poor video sooner than poor sound, because poor video is just like less enjoyable, but poor sound can be grating. So little things like figuring out how to not have the pops hit your mic can be great. The last thing that I want to make sure that I say to you guys before we go, or you folks, before we go back to the main room, two things. One, internet connection. So in the room that Richard was in, Richard was on the Wi-Fi because we couldn't find the other Ethernet cable. But it's the best bet is always to be hardwired into the internet. So in here, we've used command hooks to run Ethernet cables all through our house so that all of our places where we work can be hardwired into the internet. If you can't be hardwired into the internet, then try to make sure that you are reducing the competition for your Wi-Fi connection. So, I don't know, bribe your sister to not watch Bridgerton while you're doing your show. Great. Okay, so we've shown you how to make the most of a really simple setup in Richard's room. In here, we've got a slightly improved level up. Rather than taking you through all of the levels that we've gone through on our journey, we're going to jump back to our current setup. And Carissa, there's a lot of equipment in there. Please try not to be overwhelmed unless you're an equipment geek and then just like eat your heart out. But Carissa's going to try to give context and the purpose of all of the equipment in there so that you can imagine all of the possibilities and all of the intermediary steps between this and that. So we will go back over to Carissa.
Thank you so much, Miranda. All right. I am so excited to get to tell you all about some of the insane things we have going on in this room. Now, one of the things you undoubtedly noticed first when we started going into the other spaces was the sound quality. So Richard's room had the kind of not as good sound quality, and that is him working off of a standard microphone on a standard MacBook. They're fine, you could understand him, but it definitely has a tinny quality. And when you come into this room and you hear the cardioid microphone that Miranda is using in setup 2, you immediately realize having a good microphone is really, really valuable. Now, the microphones that we were using in Space 2 are different than the one we're using in this room. In Space 2, we have a cardioid microphone, a traditional podcasting microphone, which is perfect for what I do in that space, which is primarily, well, I guess on Thursdays I play D&D on a live stream, but most of the time what I use that room for is coaching and meetings with my writing team for a different project. So it's important that I look professional, I'm easy to understand, but I don't need that microphone to have a ton of range. What I needed to do is I needed to cut out all the outside sound and be able to kind of run around it a little bit and get me at close distance. In this room, that's not going to be effective. Now, if I'm performing solo in a big space and I'm going to move around, perhaps a lapel microphone is going to be my best bet. For most of you, a lapel microphone will be ideal, but our team is a team of 3, and you need to be able to hear all of us while simultaneously blocking out sound that happens on either side of the microphone, because when you're looking at me, typically in our magic shows, something sneaky is happening behind the microphone. So I need a microphone that is a super cardioid microphone. Now, a cardioid pattern is exactly what it sounds like. Cardioid is in heart, cat. So we're doing a French show this weekend, so I'm thinking about French words. So it's a heart pattern. So you're going to get lots of sound on one side of the microphone. Super cardioid is a similar pattern, but it's much sharper, which means the best sound right now is directly in front of the microphone. So Miranda's walking around on either side of the camera. You can't necessarily hear her. Let's maybe go ahead and bring her in so that with the roving camera, so you can actually see the microphone I'm talking about. Above me on a big boom arm, so I have a lot of range to be able to adjust it, I have a Rode Shotgun USB microphone. Now, if you're curious at any point about the equipment we're using, it's this guy right here. If you're curious about this equipment at any point, in the document we're going to be giving you shortly, like at the end of this chit-chat, we actually have a Excel spreadsheet where we have very meticulously documented every single thing we have purchased for the last 9 months. Do not get overwhelmed by it. Do not buy all that stuff. We bought some of it so you do not have to, but if you're ever curious about the exact equipment you saw, it is all listed on there. So what this microphone is going to do is allow us to pick up Richard and Miranda's sound when they're sitting in this sort of triangle shape with me, and it will block out any weird noise in other parts of the room because we are not in a sound-treated room. We're just in a room. And so there's some echoes and you can hear the fridge on the other side of that wall, but the microphone is cutting that all out for us, so we have some great sound. So a good way for me to show you what super cardioid means, you saw that Miranda was kind of turning her head and the sound was fairly consistent, but this microphone has a lot of a sharper range, which means as I turn my head to look at this wall, I'm sure you can hear that the sound quality is already dropping and it's trying to suppress all of that additional sound, but when I come back, you get this really sharp sound. So it's a really lovely theatrical microphone for performing with multiple characters. Okay, so now we're gonna quickly talk. Well, not quickly. We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna do my best. We're gonna.
Okay, actually.
We're doing okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I will stop rushing because this is one of my favorite things to talk about. Each of the rooms featured some aspect of what we're going to talk about, which is 3-point lighting. So Miranda's coming around me with our roving camera, so you'll be able to really clearly see what I'm talking about. In front of me, I have a number of lights, and even though actually in front of me I have 4 lights, we're going to still talk about as 3-point lighting. So this big box right over here, this is our key light. And when I mean our, I mean mostly mine because I sit here. Peeking out behind it, this little device here, this little bar light, that's actually technically another key light, and there's one on this side as well. Because our show has 3 characters. So each of the characters has their own key light. Now, key light is basically a main light source. It's doing most of the work in creating this really beautiful, warm shadow or this warm light on this side of my face. So that's coming in here. We have a nice filter on it so that it's a nice warm light that wraps nicely around my face. It's very pretty, which is the aesthetic we want for our show. Now the ring light was serving that purpose in the second setup where you saw Miranda, and the table lamp with that little fuzzy thing in front of it was serving the purpose as the key light in Richard's space. Now if we come over here at a 45-degree angle, so this is at a 45-degree angle to my face, on the opposite side, further back, is a light that is set up in the same temperature, but further away, a little softer. That is going to be my fill light. So that's here to give the general space a little bit of light. Now, Miranda had that in her room because we had some of the bulb lights on in the background. Richard had that in his space, actually primarily with the sunlight, but also with that tiny little light. We were doing these on different levels in every single room. And so this light is designed to fill in this side of my face. Now, what you're going to notice as I lean forward, and it's not perfect because we do have a little bit of light spill from the outside, this side of my face is brighter than this side of my face, and that is on purpose. In real light, people are not evenly lit, and things that are evenly lit appear flat. And the whole goal here is to have people forget that they are on the other side of a computer screen. So to make things look three-dimensional, to really remind people that the space has layers is really important. And these two aspects of lighting, having one side of your face be a little bit, tiny bit more in shadow than the other side of your face, is going to be a key to doing that. Now, this room is quite bright. That is deliberate. We do a comedy show. Everything in our show is lit in what's referred to as a high key. So everything's quite bright, and that really serves comedy. If we brought these lights down, we could create a little bit more drama. If you watch our Halloween special, which is still available online, that entire thing is shot in a low-key lighting setup. Same exact lights, but just set up a little bit different. Same configuration, same lights, but we've brought the lights down just a little bit to give us a different quality. Now, 3-point lights, and I've only talked about 2, so we're going to talk about this wonderful guy up and behind me by my head. This is what's referred to as a background light or a hair light. In-house, we talk about it as a hair light. This is designed to separate me from the background. We like for our hair lights to be really bright. You might not like that, but we like it a lot in our room. So you're going to see there's a little bit of blue light here, just giving my body a little shape. And this is going to pull me away from the background. In a second, we're going to turn these on and off so that you know what we're talking about. Now, you might notice a few things happening in the background. For example, you see some what are referred to as practicals. You can see actual lights and these little candles, which are actually just from IKEA. They're LEDs. This helps make the background more interesting and also gives us some depth. So we have our key light, our fill light, our hair light. Our hair light is, because it's blue, you see it's blue, it's motivated by this light. So your brain thinks the scene makes sense because it sees blue light here and it sees blue light here. But this blue light is doing none of this. It's actually this light above that's doing all this work. And then we have some lovely practicals. So one of the best ways to communicate this and what each light is doing is to turn them on and off. So I'm going to take over with this camera from Miranda, and okay, good. I just want to make sure I'm actually showing you. I'm going to show Miranda over here, and she's going to turn each light off so you can see what it's doing to my face. So here's Miranda. She's going to turn off our key light. So you can see what that's done here. So you can see what it was responsible for lighting, which is this side of my face primarily. Most of the room has gotten dark, but pretty much your subject, which is me, is the thing that has suffered the most. Now, this is quite a dramatic look, so maybe you would love this, but for our purposes, this is inappropriate. So we're going to turn that light back on. Miranda's going to walk around behind our setup and turn off our fill light. So everybody look on this side of my face, but also keep your eyes on the general scene. The room has darkened considerably, and also we have lost that beautiful fill light on this side of my face. So now we get quite a bit of contrast. Without that fill light, the whole scene looks a little bit gray, in part because we're getting a little bit of spill because, again, we just moved in. We don't have all of the curtains up. And so there is some contrast between the light temperature of the lights we use in the room and the light that's coming in from outside, and that's creating grayness, which we can easily undercut by turning on the fill light. Thank you, Miranda. So Miranda's going to come around behind me and turn off this hair light. So I'm going to see if I can do both. Look. Yes, look at me. I'm doing such a good job. So she's going to turn that off. Now you can see that now I sort of, especially because I'm wearing black, which is all very deliberate, this scene, because our background is gray and our couch is gray, which we never do in the show. In the show, I wear bright pink. I basically don't have a waist. I barely have a body. But if we turn that back on, look at all my edges. I suddenly have quite a bit of a shape now. I am popping from the background. I exist. It is very easy to tell what is midground, background, and foreground. And then all of these lights, I will hand that back to Miranda, all these lights you see behind us, these are all done with smart bulbs, which is why they're different colors, because I can control this with my phone and I can change the colors, and sometimes we use that as an effect within the show. So the colors will change in the show to communicate a character's mood. So I think that's enough for lights. Also, we do a lot of this with gels. So gels are an easy way, an expensive way to create light. Anything I missed on lights?
People of color.
Tones.
These people of color, Absolutely. Thank you. So, less now because it is winter, but over the summer, Richard went for long, long walks every day, and Richard's skin picks up and soaks up color like nobody's business. And what we found is that slowly as we were doing the show, I only knew how to light for white skin because that is who I am, and that is what most of the information out there is about. So Miranda and I looked fine, but Richard looked invisible. He basically became a big non-existent nobody, and he was in shadow. And then as it was very sad because Richard is an important part of the show, and as I started to learn about lighting people of color, we noticed watching Star Trek that, Worf in the first few seasons, you can't see him at all. So this is a problem that exists throughout film. So basically that is why Miranda and Richard, if you see here, have their own key lights. So these lights that we talked about at the beginning as key lights, and they are controlled separately that way. And also Richard's skin tone changes a lot through the season. So right now it is not as bright as it normally is, but in the summer we're going to crank that baby up to 100 so that Richard is visible. So recognizing that people of color have darker skin tones and you might have to throw considerably more light on them, and also the color temperatures of those light are going to be important. And trial and error is going to be your best way to get those to look good. And also, because I am a pasty lady, one of the things you'll notice on this light that is Richard's light is that we have a flag on it. And now flag is a fancy word for a black piece of cardboard from Amazon that Miranda graciously painted, and then it is duct taped to the light. It's not sophisticated, but this helps so that we just light Richard, who has darker skin tone, and that light does not spill on me and mess up my beautiful fill light silhouette. So being able to flag lights is also going to help you control those lights really well. Did I miss anything now?
I don't think so.
Great, let's talk a little bit about the monitor setup that we have. So we talked earlier on about how we use a teleprompter. Now, people think about a teleprompter as a thing that scrolls past and you get words, and we can use the setup you're looking at now to do that, and we do sometimes when I don't know my lines, which is often. But what we mostly use it for is what you see it now. So right now we are looking at what I am looking at what you can see. But if we click this little button, which is how we mostly do, then we can see you. And because I do a show that is primarily improvised, I need to be able to riff on what the audience is doing. And also, as a magician, I need that instantaneous feedback to know how to move and motivate my effects. So being able to actually see the audience in real time, while also making it look like I'm looking directly at you, which technically I am because look, I can see all of your wonderful faces, is really, really valuable. Now, can we toggle back to the other one so that I can see what they can see? So right now, this is valuable if I'm talking to you, but this actually gives me the opportunity to look directly at you while seeing what you see. And in this particular thing that we're doing right now, that's really valuable. Now, taped to the teleprompter below, we have our set list. This is something you always have. Above the teleprompter, we have these little things that allow us to have cue cards of special information, which you are now getting to read the things that I didn't memorize. We have our timekeeper off the side, and then we have an additional monitor. Now, part of why we have an additional monitor is so I can do a bunch of things in the show with it, which, it's connected to this thing. But also the reason it's here, it's because everything like our split screens and such. So let me spotlight someone. All right, someone's got to get pinned. I'm pinning you. I'm going, I have to remove my spotlight. Never mind, I'm not going to pin you right now. But if I did pin you,
can you split screen the roving cam?
I will split screen with this guy because I just want, so basically you can see kind of our poll thing, but this thing, if you look, right now I'm looking that way. So typically we would reverse this so I'm looking into the middle of the scene. So we always want you looking into the middle of the scene. So we try to make it so that we have this set up and we have the control with the way we have the monitor so that if I'm looking at the monitor, I'm also looking into the middle of the scene. So there's a lot of time and effort put into that. And then again, as I said before, I can look at you over here and talk to you here, which gives me the opportunity to do a take to the audience. So having that flexibility with having a second monitor so that sometimes it looks like I'm talking to people because we are both talking on the fold, and sometimes I talk into the camera. That flexibility is all done through manipulating where the monitors all are in the room, which is so, so important and so valuable. Anything I missed here, Miranda? You were signaling me.
Oh, I was just going to say, in case you have no idea how a teleprompter works, that's a mirror, a two-way mirror. Is that how mirrors work? One-way mirror? Whatever. There's a piece of glass on an angle, and there's an iPad there, and the iPad is into the Zoom call, and the camera is behind the mirror.
Exactly. Okay, so we have a lot of things here other than cue cards and things. We have a wireless keyboard, which I will go to our wide. We have a wireless keyboard. We have a mouse. This allows me to do things on the fly. And we have our stream deck. This stream deck has a bunch of little buttons. And these buttons, oh, thank you, Miranda. These buttons correspond with different things we need them to do and sound effects. And I also have a universal mute here. So everything I need to do, I can do with the click of a button, rather than using the mouse to find something on my computer. But in this particular environment where we're teaching, I need everything. So being able to have those is valuable. But also look at this frame. We're using the frame. I have the frame set up so that I have a little bit of room above my head. I'm a little short in the scene because Richard and Miranda are taller than me, so it's mostly framed for them. But in this framing, all of that business that you just saw is out of frame. So all you have to look at is me, but I still have those things all within arm's length to be able to work with it. Now, split screening is something we do all the time. This is one way to split screen. I am going to see if I'm going to have to remove spotlight, but that's okay because I'm the only one talking, I just realized. Okay, great. So I am going to pick a person.
Turn off the roving cam.
Yeah, great. So I am going to pin.
Hey, Farron, can we pick on you? Give us a thumbs up. Thanks, Farron.
Farron, I'm picking on you. So I have pinned Farron on my computer, but I am still talking, so it's maintaining my spotlight. Then I'm going to pull Farron up. Where are you? There you are. Hello. And if you look, I am looking at Farron because I'm looking at him on this additional monitor, and I'm looking into the middle of my frame, and he can wave and say hi to me. And we could do a card trick together like this. And I could do lots of things where I'm talking to you this way, but then sometimes I'm talking here where I'm inviting the audience into the conversation. And this little dance of looking at you, but I am looking at you because we have a monitor here with your beautiful face. And then I can look over here and I can look at the audience. Thank you for letting us. Look at your big smile. You have not performed in a while. All right, I'm going to let you off the hook, sir. I'm going to remove your spotlight, and I'm going to spotlight myself, even though that probably doesn't matter. So the reason why you still saw me, even though I had him pinned, is because all of you are muted, but I'm talking. So Zoom prioritized my video since mine is the only one making noise.
Despite no one being spotlight.
Despite no one being spotlight, it would default spotlight to me because I'm the one talking. But spotlighting is still very, very important. We actually have gotten to attend some like weird celebrity charity things where they've raised like $1 million, but nobody knew how to spotlight. And one guy would cough and it would go over to them, and we're just like, you should take our lecture. It's very frustrating to talk to you. Okay, great. So split screening, depth and practicals. You see that this scene, just like in room 2, communicates quite a bit about our character. You see a little bit of booze things. Even the fact that this side has some organic shapes, this side has more structured shapes. The Lawrence character sits on this side and the Marcy character sits on this side, and helps inform a little bit about who they are. Everything in the frame when you're performing in this context becomes content about the characters that reflect back on the show. So just being really specific about what you choose to include. The other thing is going to be electrical management, and I'm actually going to invite Miranda to talk about that because it is the technical area that I have just given up on, and Miranda has generously taken over because it requires some brain power.
I actually don't know that much about electricity, but I had to learn enough when I was a street performer because I had been a classical theater actor before that, and suddenly I was on the street with no technicians. So it helps to think of electricity a little bit like water, right? Only... What do you want? You want the backups?
Richard's looking for the
Yes,
backups.
oh, yeah.
Only so much water can flow through a pipe of a certain size, right? So in your wall, you have 2 sockets. Only so much electricity can come through each of those. So if you have a big setup like us, and you have literally every light connected to a power bar that's coming out of one socket, it kind of doesn't matter having those super fancy lights because they're not going to be able to get enough electricity to do everything you need them to do. So it can be really helpful to just make sure that you're dividing all the things that you're plugging in into as many sockets and ideally as many circuits as possible, which is kind of hard to do if you live in an apartment like ours where we have 10 sockets in this room and they're all on the same circuit. But it can be managed.
Yeah.
And the other thing...
Extension cords.
Once
we send you our tech sheet, you'll notice there are 3,000 extension cords on it.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a lot of extension cords.
We also had a problem where this iPad that we use for our teleprompter was losing charge during the show, even though it was plugged in. It was plugged into the computer, and the computer was plugged into the power bar that was plugged into the wall with all of the lights. So the iPad was not getting enough charge, and it was being depleted during the show really, really quickly because everything was trying to pull electricity from the same place. So just plug your electricity into more water pipes, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. The other big thing is having backups. So you see a system here that's fairly sophisticated, but we also have a lot of backups because anything that can go wrong in this environment will go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our cam link. This is actually a backup cam link. Cam link is how our DSLR camera is talking to our computer so that it can go out to you. This is
Everything.
This is everything. So we recognize that without this, we cannot use that camera. So we have two because eventually someone's going to step on it, and so we have two. We also have two of every cable except for the one we needed to plug Richard's computer in. We actually do have four of those, but four was not enough to plug three computers in. So
Yeah.
we have a backup for everything.
Nice.
I'm just realizing now that I did not give them the worksheets to follow along in the rooms with
That's
us.
okay.
Oh,
We'll give
do
them.
that.
They're in the big handbook, so we'll give that. Why don't we do our wrap up, and then I will send them the handbook, and we can do questions.
Cool.
Yeah, the little wrap up involving how the show interacts with your home. So, after all of this technical information, after seeing all of this equipment, you might be wondering, how do they exist in that apartment? And that's one that we've worked out over the course of really over the past 11 months. Of like the practical reality of living with all of this equipment, all these cords, and all of our work in our living space. And that's been a question that we've been actively working through for the past 11 months. And so we've come up with some practical solutions in the form of things on wheels, which are really important to be able to pack away your work and to set it up so that there's a firm ritual in how you begin and end your work, and that it's out of the way and you can be done at the end of the day.
Should I show some of those things?
Yeah, let's show it.
Yeah, let's show some of those things.
Just find the row. Oh,
Did you find her?
she's not co-host, so she's down the list, and we didn't ask her.
Oh no!
Yeah, just search roaming. There we go.
I get it.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't find her earlier.
Add spotlight.
Also, we've
Okay.
decided all of our cameras are girls. I can take this one.
You wanna do it? Okay, so
before you use the mic, otherwise you'll
yes.
scream.
Yeah, things on wheels and putting things away. Some of the sure, we can start with things on wheels. So we basically positioned our studio in the middle of our living room, which we'll see in a second. We kind of subdivided our living room, and we built a whole riser to put all of our tech equipment on so that when we're done our show, we can push it into this space. This couch is not a real couch, as you saw. I built it out of garbage, and it's on sliders so that we can push it all the way back. We can push all the tripods in, and then we can have a life. And these walls are all coroplast. They're fake walls. If Carissa shows you over here, you can also see how it's all hanging, but also that there's Richard's weights. And that cart is actually a good thing as well. Rather than having traditional props tables with all of our props laid out, we have these little rolling IKEA carts where things can live so that we can reset the props and then we can just roll them into the studio. So essentially our goal is that at the end of the night, everything can come into this space. But things are also on tripods, and this couch is built out of 3 pieces on pin hinges. So that if we were going to take a really long break from doing shows, all of this stuff could get taken down and folded up and put back there. Yeah, you can see the pin hinges back here. Yeah. So I think those are some examples of some of the systems that we have so that this can pack down to varying degrees and we can have a life. You want to sit in the middle? It's weird if I'm here.
I'll take out the roving cam.
Yeah.
It's weird partially because you guys are both very tall and I am tiny. I'm a tiny human. I think we should questions. We just want to say thank you so much for coming to everyone. We are going to do questions, but we very much want to thank you. And we know this can feel overwhelming, but we didn't know how to do any of this 9 months ago. I hope that what you noticed in our wonderful montage is that our show was not good. It looked bad at the beginning.
It was built out of garbage.
It's built out of garbage.
But it still
and
made
hope.
people happy.
It did. And we have been able to do some wonderful things through this, and it has been a wonderful way to reach out through the void. And after we did the first show, the 3 of us went for a walk afterwards together after we did the very first show. And the thing we all talked about was that we got some of what we get from doing live theater from this. Not all of it, but some of it. And some of it has been really valuable to both keep our skills sharp and also keep us sane. And that doesn't mean that it's not hard. It is hard, and there are conflicts. We live together and we work together. It's not the easiest. but it is lovely to have a purpose. And that is something this show has given us. And we just really want to provide you guys with the information you need to do the same. All right, we're ready for questions.
Okay, shall we try and jazz hands all around? Thanks, Jerry. Shall we probably try and do these fairly quickly? I guess we'll find out. Someone is asking about additional software to manage your video sources, such as loopback, and I think that would be a great opportunity to talk about audio drivers as well.
Sure. So loopback will work. There are tons of options. OBS, Ecamm. This stuff is all stuff that we have in the handbook that you're welcome to view. But yeah, having a piece of software that's going to manage your inputs is really valuable. You could also do that by having an external box. There's lots of external boxes where you plug microphones and cameras in, and then that thing does the work for you. But we have had a lot of success with software-based units that are going to bring in different videos. So we are using Ecamm. I have played with OBS. The best way to explain it, that OBS is like Linux and Ecamm is like a Mac. It's just easier to use. OBS is very sophisticated. It does things that Ecamm doesn't do, but there's a bit more of a learning curve. So you can work to your own level of proficiency. Also, OBS is PC, and you can do OBS on a Mac, but Ecamm is only on Mac right now, unfortunately. But that program will allow you to bring in different audio sources, like microphones, but also put in music and sound effects, and also bring in multiple cameras. You saw that Miranda was shifting from one camera to another. That was all done through Ecamm. Something to keep in mind, if you want the sound to come through Ecamm or a similar program and into software like Zoom, you're going to need to download an internal audio driver, which basically makes it so that the microphone that Zoom is picking up, what it thinks of as a microphone, is actually the sound that's happening inside your computer. So an external audio driver for Mac, you're going to be looking at something like Black Hole is going to be essential. But all of that stuff is in our handbook. So if you want to go into it crazy, really get into that kind of stuff, all that stuff is described in detail with workflows in our 50-page handbook.
Which I will share as Carissa answers this next question.
What's the next question?
The next question is about how we manage our ticket distribution.
Ooh, a whole bunch of different ways. So we have done it a number of ways. We've done it through a PayPal link, and I just keep track of all the emails and tickets in a spreadsheet. We've done it at that level. We have one time used Eventbrite. That was really easy and lovely to use. Also, we once used a thing, I think it's called Lunchbox, but it might not be, I don't even know, which is a ticketing plugin for WordPress that's really valuable. But mostly what we've been doing lately is we've been partnering with theaters that already have sophisticated and wonderful ticketing systems and would like to make some money. And then we split the take with them, usually 50-50. So they take care of tickets and distribution, and then we just have to focus on our show, which has been really lovely. And if you want to see one such partnership, we are doing a version of our show in French on Friday and Saturday of this week with Untitled. And you can watch the three of us do our darndest to speak French. It's going to be an adventure. Also, the show is a very different show than we normally do. The show has become about language and communication, so it's also kind of about language. But yeah, so there's lots of ways to do ticketing. Hopefully, I answer your question.
What do you think of Discord?
Oh, Discord's cool. Yeah, Discord's cool. Discord is it's sort of like Twitch had a baby with Google Hangout. Discord does a lot of stuff. So it's basically like a full Hangout space. In terms of creating a show, the controls that exist in Discord are limited. So it's good if you're going to just do like a concert where you don't want to jump around a bunch with cameras and do a lot of insane things. You don't need to control the audience's mic quite as much. Kind of to the level that we can in Zoom. That can be a really good platform. Discord's really, really great, and it's becoming more and more popular. So getting in now is probably good because it looks like it's just going to get more popular moving forward. Discord's great, but it does a lot. You got one?
Yeah, there's so a question. Do you deliver your shows as a Zoom webinar and then control what is happening from the hosting side? Also, where can we access your handbook?
Fantastic. So this is not set up as a webinar right now. Webinars can be really expensive to run. It's like another level of Zoom. We have done shows as a webinar. We did of them, I think, over Christmas. And then a few of our fundraisers have been set up as webinars to use some of those new features. And so if you have a huge audience expecting thousands of people, if you need controls that are beyond what basic Zoom will do and you're willing to spend it, looking into some of the features that exist in the...
Oh, I accidentally
unmuted my computer, sorry.
That's okay. Looking at some of the features, so that is a teachable moment.
Do not have multiple devices audio on in the same room.
Yeah, that would have just kept getting louder and more annoying until everybody left. But we muted it, so it's okay. So yeah, webinars offer lots of great features. But what you're looking at right now, is the basic Zoom package. You don't need to spend a ton of money to do shows. And for our purposes, this is perfect. We do have the add-on feature where we can have more than 100 audience members, because at least 1 or 2 shows we do a month have more than 100 guests. So we have that add-on, but other than that, this is the basic Zoom package. But yes, there are webinars. They do offer additional features and a lot more control, but they can be expensive. And then the other question that was asked as part of that was...
where can we access your handbook?
I believe we're dropping it in the chat.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am working on that.
Oh, I can do it.
Yeah, can you do it? My Zoom is not letting me pull a file from my computer right now for some reason, which is terribly embarrassing while teaching about Zoom.
Do you want to take the next question?
Well, yeah, I think you might have to answer it. I don't have an answer to it, but I think that we might as well bring it up as something to think about. Someone's asked about how to avoid hot spots on white hair while still illuminating the face adequately.
Oh, that is
Yeah.
a really good question. Okay, so you're going to want diffusion.
Can you guys... Oh, yeah, okay.
Make sure that's message to everyone.
Oh, yeah, that's just to you. Hold on.
So diffusion. So Carissa was some early examples of diffusion was like Richard putting the tissue over the desk lamp, and also the covers that you see on our key light and fill lights. Those are some ways in which we're softening light and diffusing it. And I imagine that Carissa is going to pick up on explaining the light more technically from there. Also, we don't have a lot more questions in the chat, so please get your questions in there, and like, don't be embarrassed if it seems like your question is really simple, because I would have asked it. I didn't understand any of this, and I still don't understand a bunch of it.
Yeah, I'm going to share the link because the file is too big.
Ah, that's the problem. Okay, so Chris is sharing the link for the handbook right now. I will also mention that there are some diagrams in there of how information flows within your computer, which will look really overwhelming when you look at them. But if you're someone like me who doesn't understand how 4 or 5 programs in your computer could create a Zoom show, those can be really useful tools for troubleshooting stuff. Want to talk about white hair and diffusion?
Yeah, sure. White hair and diffusion. Absolutely. So obviously, any like bright spots are going to cause basically blowout. So one way to show this in the room is, Richard, do you mind cranking up our background blue light so that we get it to be really, really too bright?
The one down there?
Background blue. So we're going to crank that all the way up, and you're going to see a big white spot here, and that's going to look bad because we're going to get a hot spot. And that's just so that we know what a hot spot is. So we're going to get really, really bright spots over here, and that is no good. Great, so this is what a hotspot is. This is white, it has no detail, and so we don't get a lot of really lovely richness. So that's part of why this light is never all the way up like this, because it creates a hotspot. So you can bring that back down. So often white things, like these pants, are gonna cause hotspots. And so the white's gonna have no detail, it's gonna really crush that white, and it's gonna make things look a little bit weird. So lighting in a lower key is gonna be your first step. So just turning all of the lights down a little bit, your key light, your fill light, and your hair light, all of them down, and lighting in a slightly lower key will mean that you have a little bit more detail in your whites, but also diffusing it. So if you have a really bright, if you have a light at the same level of brightness and you add a diffusion, so for example, this light here, our key light, has diffusion over it. This light over here has diffusion. You can use a bed sheet. You can get like not very expensive diffusers very cheaply on Amazon. When you diffuse it, you soften the light a little bit and you round it out, which means you might get a little bit more detail in your whites. And then your other option is to give your light a little bit of different color temperature. So right now, if your hair is like a blue-white, then having a warmer light might be enough of a contrast that it'll pull out some of that detail, or vice versa. So having just like a little bit of warmth in your light might change it. And then also you can change the settings on your camera. So if you have a DSLR, just making sure that you're pulling really crisp focus and you're keeping your focus really tight is gonna help you pull out the details and any hot spots. And then also bringing down the ISO on your camera is gonna help bring up the details in your whites. lots of things. Sorry, went crazy.
Here's another complicated one. Someone is asking about recommendations for audio when singing along to a backing track. Yeah, he says, I see you don't use any headphones. If I don't use headphones, I get feedback.
Oh, that's very smart. Okay, so that's part of why we went with this particular microphone. It's because this microphone is doing a lot of crushing and ignoring the sound from, because, you know, if you guys were talking, we could hear you. In our show, we can hear the audience, but our microphone doesn't pick it up. And I'm gonna put on a song which we'll be able to hear in the room, and you're not gonna hear it through the microphone. I'm gonna put the Edith Piaf. So I can hear that. I'm hearing it in the timing you're hearing it. You can see that with my fingers. Anyway, so part of that is the microphone. The microphone itself is doing a really good job of ignoring all of the background noise, and so we could sing to that live and it would be perfectly fine. So making sure you have a really good microphone. But yes, headphones are a good solution if you don't have a microphone that's doing a good job of suppressing that additional sound. Also, there are sound suppression settings within the Zoom app itself, and they are very sophisticated. So you can use, you can turn on original sound, but then also turn on sound suppressing and get a nice mix there. So you're gonna wanna play with all of those elements. But yeah, this microphone itself is suppressing some of the background noise. The Ecamm settings are set to suppress the background noise so we don't get echo. We have echo cancellation, as is Zoom. So every single step of the way, if we can do it, we're doing it.
Nice. Okay, we have a couple more questions. I just want to check in with people. Do you mind has anyone clicked on that link to the document, to the Google document? Yeah, and you were able to get access? Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure it had all the right permissions and you weren't locked out.
Yeah. Normally we can drag and drop those files into the chat, but my Zoom was very upset at the 50 pages.
It's a lot.
It didn't care for 50 pages. But you do. You're like, thank you for this homework. Some people are nodding, some people making faces.
We have done our best to format it in an organized way.
Yeah. Okay.
Someone is asking how many audience Zoom can handle without having any connection issues.
Oh, okay. So the Zoom can handle all of them because the connection issues are not going to be on Zoom. Their servers are really, really great. It's not about how many they can handle. It's about what level of Zoom allows you to have a certain number of participants. So the basic Zoom, you can have up to 100. But if you're going to have up to 100, we recommend not having more than 80 because you're probably going to have a few people logged in yourself, some of your tech team, and then it's also good to have fluff room. You don't want that 100th person who bought a ticket not being able to get in because Susie logged in on her phone as well, and now you're in trouble. You can buy a package to increase that up to 500, which is the package that we have, so that we don't have to worry about it. And then with webinars, you can have many, many more. The show we did with Lena Hall, the fundraiser we did last weekend, we had either 1,000 or more than 1,000 people on a Zoom call, and it was perfectly fine because each person's individual connection is going to affect it, but the Zoom servers can handle lots and lots of people.
Someone is asking if I can unmute them so they can ask a hard to describe question about Zoom stuff. So I will just find.
We're gonna find you and actually let's I'm gonna change it so that you guys can unmute yourselves.
Great.
But I'm gonna trust you to be good, and if not, I will take away your permission. So you can actually unmute yourself now if you'd like.
Amanda, unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi, Amanda.
So sorry, it's just hard to write it, the question. But so I teach a class and when they perform, it's a theater class. When they perform, I want to record them as they are spotlit, as a pair, as a group, which is wonderful. We can all see that, the whole class can see them perform. But when I record it, it will only either record speaker view or gallery view or some combination of shared screen, speaker view, gallery view. So I'm wondering if you ever found, or maybe you record, when you pre-record, what do you use? Do you just screen record? Because Zoom doesn't do it. It will, when I look back at the recording, it switches between all of the members of the group, which totally defeats the purpose of the spotlight after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what Zoom does allow you to do is it allows co hosts, many different co hosts, to be recording their screens separately. So, for example, Richard will record on his computer and Miranda will record on her computer, and those will give us different pieces of information. And then we're also recording within my computer. Even right now, we're recording the whole call, which means that way we'll get your audio and the audio of the audience, and we'll also probably get a gallery view. But I'm actually recording the eCam as we're talking. So we'll have one that's just us. That's just this one main camera. And then when we do the editing, and also the eCam will record at full quality, whereas sometimes Zoom's not recording at the full quality. It's doing its best, but you won't get quite the sharpness. So then we edit those in post together and we mix the sound so we get a nice video. So one option for you might be to have each individual student pin themselves. So pinning, having no one spotlit, but just pinning themselves and having each of those people record themselves separately and then mixing those together in post. They can also multiple pin, so you could have nobody spotlit and you, just yourself, could pin them on your computer so that you get the arrangement you want and then record that, and it will record whatever you have pinned in that session as long as you don't click back over to gallery or you don't spotlight anyone.
I have another suggestion to offer, and it is hearsay. It is not something that we have done ourselves, but it's something that I overheard Lena saying in our rehearsals. So Richard and I commonly record the show on our computers, but because we are commonly switching to gallery view so that we can bring participants in, we're not necessarily getting what the audience is seeing. And I believe I overheard Lena say in our rehearsal that if you record to your computer versus if you record to the cloud, Zoom prioritizes things slightly differently. I have no confirmation on that, but that's something that you can explore.
Yeah. So all of those things are worth trying. I'm not exactly sure what your situation is, but I think a combination of recording to your computer rather than the cloud and also using the pinning feature will get you what you're looking for.
So we have to wrap up, but there's a couple more questions in here that I think we can answer quite briefly before we wrap.
Okay.
There's a question about whether we're using a laptop or a desktop in here.
Laptop. Really good laptop, though. I bought a brand new laptop. The schematics for it are in the Abstract Rabbit spreadsheet,
which we haven't shared yet.
It's in the handbook.
Oh, it's in the handbook?
Nice.
Yes. So
there's a link to it in the handbook.
That's where the overwhelming spreadsheet is of everything that we bought. And someone has also asked about an estimate of our internet speed.
Yeah, we're at roughly 19 or 20 megabytes per second upload speed.
Yeah, and we're with TELUS
And
now.
we're with TELUS. Yeah.
Shaw was like, you can have a little bit of internet, or you can have enough internet to live stream video games. And we were like, we want an in-between internet, so we went to TELUS.
But the first show we ever did, we did on 1 meg of upload, which is why it looks like
underwater.
Yeah, it looks like we shot it on a potato. It's not good. But yeah, we recommend at least 12 meg of upload to do an online show, because that 10 is kind of like where it starts looking good if you're going to do pretty good quality, and you want that 2 meg above that for fudge room for if you do what we do, where like we have many computers on and we have a phone, and because you probably do the same thing.
Yeah, nice questions, everybody.
Yeah.
Are we done rapid fire?
I think that's all.
Oh,
yeah.
I was so ready.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's
great.
only 2. Thank you so much for joining us. We do have that show coming up at La Cité if you would like to experience the show in French, if you speak it in French, or if you would like to laugh at us being terrible at French and my character not understanding any of it.
We're gonna do our best. It's gonna be fine. But that's kind of nice. Is like this online environment has given us the opportunity to do some silly things, including let's try and do our show in French, and you'll be able to see how reliant in that show I am on the teleprompter. But don't tell anybody I said that. I want them to not notice. But that's sort of the nice thing is, unless you know we're using a teleprompter, you wouldn't know that I'm doing most of my script off of a teleprompter. But it's a great tool to have for notes and stuff like that.
Yeah. David, do you have anything you'd like to say before we all take off?
No, I think I speak for all of us in saying that my brain is full, and this has been amazing. This has really opened up huge new avenues for me, and I suspect for most of us in the room. I'm going to suggest that if we've still empowered us to unmute, maybe if we can just have everyone who is willing to do so unmute, and we'll do a big round of applause for all of you, because we need this in these times. So please join me in clapping loudly Thank you all so much.
You are so welcome. Please feel free to dig into that workbook, and also I believe our contact information's on there.
If it isn't, we're very easy to
We're
find on
very
social
easy
media.
to find.
Google Lucy Darling and you'll find us.
Yeah, so
well,
if you
the Lucy Darling.
Yeah,
Google
so,
the Lucy Darling. Lucy Darling is a children's sticker company.
so yeah, if you find something on there, if you have a question and it's not on that document, feel free to reach out to one of us, and we're always happy to help. And volunteering everybody else's services without asking their permission, because we live together, and so we do stuff like that now. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
All
Thank you very
right.
much.
Thank you so much.